Player housing is coming to the world of Warcraft. We've been getting a ton of information about it fed to us by devs and content creators over the last few months. And you are here because, like me, you are probably very pumped about player housing and wish you could have it right now, but you can't. But if you are like me, you're also a perpetual planner, and there is stuff you can do right now to get ready for housing. See, Blizzard has been talking a lot about how they're not just designing housing to be a midnight feature. They are seeding decor throughout the entire game, old and new, in a way that it seems like is gonna make it feel like housing has been around the whole time. Old content is gonna be back in a major way, and they've said that they want to avoid making people backtrack and retread as much as they can. So stuff that you would have earned had housing been around back then, you'll have unlocked when housing goes live. And that, my friends, means we can prep. So without further ado, here are the 5 things that I think are the best things you can do to get ready for player housing. 1. Clean up legacy raid achievements and dungeons too. We've already seen examples this early on of furnishings that are going to come from raids specifically. Anixia's head is the biggest example of this. That means a great thing to do with your time right now is go make sure you've done all the legacy raids. And while you're there, go through the achievements list and look at all the glory of the blank raider or glory of the blank hero achievements for dungeons and get those done at the same time. There's no guarantee that furniture will be tied to any of those achievements specifically, but you do usually get a cool mount, which it sounds like you will be able to place in your house in some capacity. And while you're at it, you'll have cleared out all the old raids that will have something like a boss trophy tied to them. Even if you're like me and don't really think that boss trophies are your cup of tea for decor, this is still worth doing because some of those trophies might be really useful when merging and clipping them with other housing items in order to create very specific appliances or other things that you want in your home. Flip on some Netflix or selfishly some YouTube, get a snack, and go take all those old raid bosses to task. A side benefit of doing this is that some of that old content will also help you towards the second item on this list. 2. Old reputations. Blizzard has already basically told us that old reputations are going to have furnishing for sale, so there's no better time to go get exalted on some of the reps you've forgotten than right now. Reputations, particularly from older expansions, run the gamut in terms of how much work is actually required to get them. Some you can just slam a bunch of dungeons in order to get to exalted, some have very specific dailies, and some, like the Argent Tournament, require a ton of time investment in order to get up to exalted and get the rewards. Blizzard has also mentioned that where it makes sense, furnishings will use the currency relevant to that expansion or that reputation. So for stuff like the Argent Tournament, it might be handy to have some of that currency banked as well. There's a few things that you can specifically look for when you're trying to maximize your reputation gains. The Dark Moon Fair 10% rep bonus is a big one, obviously, but there's also a World Quest weekly event to look for that can help boost reputation gains for reputations that came from expansions that featured world quests, so Legion and onward. And one final one that you may have been overlooking is the reputation bonus that time walking gives you. If it's time walking week for, say, BFA, go slam world quests and normal quests, all that stuff during time walking to help give yourself an extra boost. Speaking of which, 3. Slam some quests, level some alts. Not everybody has sought out Lore Master as an achievement, but Blizzard has specifically called out legacy quests as a probable source of furniture rewards. So it's time to go clean up quest lines you never did. You can use Lore Master to see regions you might have easy outstanding quests in, hit up that minimap button to show low-level quests and fly around in old zones, or make some alts. We know there are internal decor styles tied to races in at least some capacity from when several creators tried housing at Blizzard's Boston office. What we don't know is how many total there will be, or what's required to access them. And since you probably want to make sure quests are cleared anyways, this is a perfect excuse to level up some alts of different races that you haven't capped before. I'm betting both base and allied races are going to have some furniture around getting them to cap. And there are 25 races in this game right now. If you want to prioritize, think about the general aesthetic of the races and start with the ones whose decor you like the most. And if you don't know what all those decors are, then definitely keep an eye on this channel as we go through them all one by one in the coming weeks. Also keep in mind that Legion Remix is coming out later this year, and if it's anything like MOP Remix, it will be the perfect time to get a bunch of alts leveled up to cap. So don't feel the pressure to suddenly make 25 characters. You've got time and methods. While you're making these alts, probably also worth thinking about. 4. Leveling old world professions. Blizzard has outright said that every crafting profession in the game is getting pieces of furniture to make and sell, and that the things you make are going to live in the crafting tree for the expansion they're from. Want to make this bed from Borealis? Better start working on your BFA crafting. Or these statues from Pandaria? Get your MOP professions leveled. Injecting life into all the old world professions is going to inject life into the entirety of the old world by extension, and it's going to be awesome. So if you're bored, Horde, it's not a bad idea to get the jump on some of that leveling now, so you can be the first to sell some of these items when housing hits and the demand spikes. We don't necessarily know all the details about what professions are going to make what, but the examples Blizzard gave are blacksmithing making stuff made out of metal, enchanting making magical decor, stuff that glows and sparkles and floats, jewel crafting being the designated stoneworking profession, and also teasing inscription, specifically classic inscription, being able to make the Brill coffin, which I assume is this, maybe? And to be fair, while I'm talking about crafting professions right now, another big component of this is the gathering professions that are going to be required to gather all the old world materials that these items need. Blizzard might have even teased the introduction of a new gathering profession, as the same Brill coffin screenshot shows the need for ironwood lumber, a brand new decor crafting specific reagent in their own words. But the old world ores and herbs are all going to be relevant again, which means that you can start using those gatherers to get them ready now and either use them for your own crafting or throw them in the auction house in the days after housing launches to make some quick coin, which is actually hilariously our 5th point. 5, make some money. Yeah, somebody in the comments is already like, buy a WoW token, and look, chase your bliss, but this video is about finding ways to fill time, and the final one on this list is simple. You're gonna need some gold. Blizzard has mentioned offhand that there will be some nominal fee associated with getting your house in general, but they've also mentioned multiple times that you're gonna be buying at least some furniture from vendors, and that if you want to place 10 chairs in your house, you're going to need to own 10 chairs. That means you're going to be buying, in a lot of cases, multiple furniture items from vendors and from the auction house. And you're going to need capital, especially if you're going to need to buy your own raw materials for your crafters to make furniture. I'm not about to make you a gold making guide. There's a million of them on the internet, but gathering is a tried and true staple. Consumables sell particularly well at the launch of a new patch or expansion. It's pretty easy to set up an enchanter alt who can just use their concentration to craft enchantments every couple days. Just a few ideas to get your head spinning. Or just harvest a ton of old world materials and throw them on the auction house at launch in the hopes of riding the wave. Those are the 5 things I've got on my list in terms of prep, and you may have noticed they all have one thing in common. They deal with the old expansions and old world of WoW. That old world is massive, so how do you prioritize what expansions to actually hit? Now, there's 2 things to consider off the hop: what you like the most and what others are going to like the most. Which you weigh more heavily is going to vary from person to person. I personally would always value what I like the most first, but some people are all about making the gold. For me, something like BFA ranks pretty high because I love pirates and maritimes and nautical themed stuff, and so all the stuff available from Kultiris is really high up on my to-do list. If you like orc decor, you might prioritize something like Warlords of Draenor higher because of how much orc and horde themed stuff is in that expansion. But let's do this list assuming that maybe you aren't just thinking about yourself. One of the biggest differences across these expansions is obviously graphical fidelity. The more modern the expansion, the better the stuff looks for the most part. Where you draw your modernization split depends from person to person. I generally think around MOP is where the assets start to look pretty good, and they only get better as you move later. The second thing I'm thinking about when prioritizing is variety of decor. Some expansions, just based on theming, whatever the case may be, have a larger variety in the types of decor you're going to see. What I'd consider particularly good or strong is if they have a good split of horde and alliance themed assets that can hit on the fantasy that resonates with a lot of people who play World of Warcraft. So stuff like traditional horde decor, a lot of people like the look of the horde. If that's present in an expansion with a lot of other variety, that's something to consider. And the third thing, of course, is nostalgia factor. You can't discount it, and for some people, it's even going to trump things like fidelity. This is what I call the Wrath of the Lich King factor, because people have such a strong affinity for that expansion that it's really likely to influence them wanting that decor. It's an amalgamation of these 3 factors that I'm going to use to rank these. Also, not going to include the War Within on the list, but you should get the War Within professions going, because the more recent the expansion, the higher chance that the assets were designed with things like color dyes and the like in mind. So it's going to be sought after stuff as well. But excluding that, at the top of my list, in what might come as a shock to some, is Battle for Azeroth. BFA has a lot of really solid alliance-themed architecture and decor from Kultiris. It has Mechagon for gnomish tinkering stuff. On Zandalar, we get not just Zandalari-themed items, but there's also a lot from the Volpera and Vol'dun and the Trolls and Nazmir that works well as just generic horde stuff. There's Warfronts to pull reward items from, and all the stuff from this expansion looks really good. BFA is the top of my list for prioritization, followed by WoD. Warlords of Draenor has similar reasoning to BFA, maybe a little more horde skewed, but tons of good visual imagery across the zones. And it's also getting a little boost by being one of the most annoying expansions for professions, so the sooner you can start on it, the better. After that, I probably put Legion and Mists of Pandaria beside each other. Both of these are expansions people have a really strong affinity for, really clear visual aesthetics, and pretty high fidelity assets. Below that, I'd tie up Dragonflight and Shadowlands. Dragonflight stuff looks really good, but it's not the most varied of all the expansions. Shadowlands gets dinged by the player base for some pretty legitimate reasons, but art direction and graphical fidelity shouldn't be two of them. After that is Wrath of the Lich King. People love Wrath. And then I think Classic for nostalgia and the fact that a lot of Classic players have probably been running around these zones across Era and Hardcore and Season of Discovery, so the assets are fresh in people's minds. And then Cataclysm, and finally Burning Crusade. I hopefully don't have to explain that this is not a ranking of expansions in terms of quality or my favorites or anything like that. It's purely about housing priority for items. If you think you're prioritizing something higher or lower, I would truly love to hear why down below. That's my short little summary of what I'm doing to prepare for player housing. It's keeping me pretty entertained in between Mythic Plus and giving me a reason to go out and explore the old zones that I haven't been to recently, which is a blast. If you made it this far, hopefully you enjoyed the video. And if you did, liking and subscribing really help the channel a lot, as does leaving a comment. That actually helps tremendously. You can write whatever you want down there. You can write papaya for all I care. Every piece of engagement helps people find my videos, and that means a lot to me. I'm excited to hear what you're all doing in anticipation of housing, if anything. But for now, I'm gonna go play WoW instead of just talking about it. Thanks for watching. Okay.